Good evening, everyone. I'm Sadiq Rahman. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today for this insightful webinar on the topic Cybersecurity Beyond Technology, the role of governance, risk, and compliance. When we think about cybersecurity, we often focus on firewalls, antivirus softwares, and other technical controls. However, building a secure organization requires much more than technology alone. Governance, risk management, and compliance play a vital role in helping organizations identify risk, meet regulatory requirements, and create resilient security frameworks. As cyber threats continue to evolve, understanding the importance of governance, risk assessment, compliance has become essential for students, professionals, and organizations alike. To guide us through this important subject, we are honored to have with us an experienced expert in the field. It is my great privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker, Ms. Angel Mary Alex. She is a corporate trainer specializing in information security and governance, risk and compliance with experienced training professionals across the US, Europe, India, and GCC region. She holds an MSc in Digital Forensic and Information Security and has expertise in cybersecurity, risk management, complaints, fraud prevention, and financial crime investigations. Currently, she serves as a corporate trainer, Koenig Solutions, and is former senior officer at HSBC. We are delighted to have you with us today, ma'am. Now, I request Ms. Angel Mary Alex to kindly take over the session.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for the wonderful, warm welcome and introduction on me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to join today's webinar on the topic. As you can see, it's Cybersecurity Beyond Technology, the critical role of governance, risk, and compliance. Before we get started, I'd like to do a very quick check-in. So just want to know how is everyone doing today? Feel free to drop a quick good, great, or even a simple emoji in the chat. I'd love to know where you're joining from and how you're feeling today, and maybe we'll wait for the others to join in the meantime. So please do go ahead and let me know how everyone is doing today. I hope I am audible and is the screen visible to me? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Yes, I can see messages popping up now. Good to know that everyone is doing well today. So Shafiq has already given a good introduction on me, so I'm not spending much time on that. So we'll just start with the agenda for today. So here's our roadmap for today's session. I have divided the webinar into 4 major sections so that we can gradually build our understanding from the basics to the real world application. But before that, I would just have a small request to everyone throughout the webinar. You may have questions, thoughts, or ideas that come to mind, and I encourage you to note them down as we go along to help us maintain the flow of the session, to just ensure that there is no jargon. We'll do a dedicated Q&A session towards the end. So please note down all your questions, and I will be addressing them towards the end of the session. So here, as you can see, the first section, today we'll be dealing with the cybersecurity fundamentals. We'll begin with what cybersecurity is. We'll start with a simple but important discussion. What do cybersecurity really mean? We'll explore the reality of today's threat landscape, look at why organizations continue to experience breaches despite significant investment in security technologies. Section 2 is the GRC framework as itself. So once we understand the security landscape, we'll move into the heart of today's topic, the GRC framework. We'll explore the governance, risk management, and compliance individually and answer one very important question. Why do organizations need GRC in the first place? Section 3 is GRC in practice. We'll bring the theory into practice. We'll look at how GRC and cybersecurity work together inside organizations. We'll also discuss what a typical day looks like for a GRC professional and why these skills are becoming increasingly valuable across industries. And the last section would be about your GRC journey. We'll talk about the career opportunities, compare the technical security roles with the GRC focused roles, and explore how students can begin building skills in this field today. We'll also touch on the future opportunities and why GRC professionals are becoming increasingly important in a world which is shaped right now by AI. So that's the agenda. I hope everybody is excited to dive into the session. Just let me know through chat what you feel. Shall we start? Okay. So let me move to the next slide. So let's start with a quick activity. I want everyone to think about the word cybersecurity, anything that comes to your mind. Go ahead and type it in the chat. Is it viruses? Is it firewall? Is it about cybercrime or ethical hacking? Whatever it is, I just want to know what you all think about the term when you hear cybersecurity. Let me just see it in the chat. Okay, I can see people sending out messages, hacking and exploits, encryption. Okay, good. What else? What else comes to your mind? We're just taking 1 minute here to understand what you understand about the term cybersecurity. You can see there are 31 people today who has joined with us today. So come on, people, go ahead and message. Protecting our digital assets. Okay, so interesting. I've seen few messages popping up, and honestly, these are exactly the answers I usually get. Most people associate cybersecurity with hackers breaking into systems or security professionals trying to stop them. And movies and social media these days they've reinforced the image of cybersecurity as someone sitting in a dark room, typing rapidly and hacking into systems. But here's the reality: cybersecurity is much broader than that. If we look at the options on the slide, every single one of them is actually part of cybersecurity. Yes, hacking and pen testing are part of it. Tools like firewalls, antivirus, SIEM solutions, encryption technologies, they are important. But cybersecurity also includes policies, standards, regulations, awareness programs, leadership, decisions, and the organizational culture. So think about it this way. Imagine an organization is spending millions of dollars on the latest security technologies. They have the firewalls, they have the antivirus software, they have security monitoring. But if the employees of that organization they are using weak passwords, or nobody knows how to report the risk, so would that organization really be secure? Probably not, because and that's because security isn't just technology problem, it's also the people problem, a process problem, and a leadership problem. In fact, many major security incidents they don't happen because technology failed. They happen because someone clicked a phishing link, or shared the credentials, or ignored a warning sign, or because the organizations failed to implement security measures. And this is exactly where today's topic becomes important, because governance, risk, and compliance helps organization address those non-technical gaps that the technology alone can't solve. So before we move forward, I want you to remember one thing, that cybersecurity is not just about protecting systems, it's about protecting the organizations. And to do that, we need technology along with the people, the process, the policies, and leadership all working together. Is that clear so far? Can I just get a thumbs up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you for responding. So let's move to the next slide. Cyber threats. Now let's take a look at what the threat landscape actually looks like today. So a few years ago, many people thought that cyber attacks only happen to large technology or companies. Today, that's no longer true. Hospitals are attacked, universities are attacked, governments are attacked, banks are attacked, even the small businesses are targeted. So, if an organization stores data, it is a potential target, and the consequences can be significant. So, okay, just a minute. Yeah. Yeah. So if you see here, the first point, it's according to IBM's 2024 report, the average cost of a data breach is approximately $4.88 million. Think about that for a moment. That's not just the cost of fixing computers, it includes the legal cost, the recovery efforts, loss of customer trust, and the regulatory penalties. So a single incident can impact an organization for years. Then the second one is there is a statistic that I personally find the most interesting. So approximately 72% of breaches, it involves a human element. Notice what that means. Most incidents are not purely technical. They are often linked to human mistakes, poor decisions, or lack of awareness and credential theft. So in other words, attackers are not just attacking technology, they're targeting people. And people are often easier to exploit than firewalls. Then we have another alarming statistic. So, on average, organizations take approximately 277 days to identify and contain a breach. So, that's over like 9 months. So, imagine someone breaking into your house and you only discover it 9 months later. So, that's essentially what many organizations experience. The attackers may already have access data, they might have stolen the information, established the pertinence, and long before the organization even realizes that something actually is wrong. So what does these statistics tell us? They tell us something very important. Cyber threats are not just technology problems. Technology alone cannot solve the poor decision, the lack of accountability, or the human error and the unmanaged risk. And that's exactly why organizations need governance, risk management, and compliance. Because attackers often and the human judgment, not just the weaknesses in technology. This is where GRC starts becoming a business necessity rather than just a security function. All good? Okay. Yeah. The next slide is what does it mean to be secure? So here, let me ask you a question that sounds simple but is actually quite difficult to answer. What does it really mean to be secure? Take a moment and think about it. If I asked most people this question, they would probably say having a firewall or using antivirus software, using encryptions, and having strong passwords. So, and none of these answers are wrong, but are they enough? So I have added an example here. Also, just wanted to reiterate that I know that everyone will be having questions. Please note them down, and we'll be having a Q&A towards the end of the session. Or you can put it in chat. We'll be happy to answer. Yeah. So there is an example on the slide. Imagine a bank that has the strongest vault door in the world, a vault so secure that nobody can break into it. It sounds secure, right? But what if there is no policy defining who gets access to the keys? Or what if employees' background checks are never performed? Or what if the managers never review access permission? Would you trust your money in such a bank? Definitely, we will not. And that's because security is here much more than technology. Technology gives us tools, but these are all extremely important tools. But tools alone don't make an organization secure. It also requires clear policies, risk assessment, regulatory compliance, along with the accountability and leadership. So this is actually one of the biggest mistake organization make. They believe security can be purchased. They can go on and buy tools one after the other, but they always don't ask, are we protecting the right things? Have we identified our biggest risk? Are employees following security practices? And who is accountable when something goes wrong? There should be someone accountable for it. And that's where GRC becomes important, because GRC helps answer these questions. Think it of in a way like technology tells us how to protect. GRC will help us determine what should be protected, why it should be protected, and how much protection is needed, and whether that protection is actually working or not. All right. Okay, this is one of the important slide. So one of the most common point of confusion in the security, they are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. In fact, understanding this difference helps explain why GRC plays such an important role. So imagine I have a confidential, let's say a university exam paper, which is printed on a physical paper and it is locked inside a physical cabinet. There is no computers involved, there is no internet involved, there is no technology involved. So the question is, if someone steals that exam paper, is that a security incident? Absolutely, it is a security incident, but is it a cybersecurity incident? Not necessarily. It's an information security incident, and that's the key difference. So information security is a broader discipline. Its goal is to protect information regardless of where that information exists. That could be digital files, printed documents, databases, emails. And information security is concerned with protecting informations in all forms. And it focuses on three key principles, which is known as a CIA triad, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Cybersecurity is a specialized branch within information security. Its focus is on protecting the digital systems and the technology environment. It will include networks, servers, cloud environment, endpoints, digital infrastructure. And cybersecurity deals with threats such as hacking, malware, phishing, or ransomware. So it focuses primarily on protecting the technology. So you can, I would like to share an analogy here. Imagine information security is a large umbrella. Under that umbrella sits the cybersecurity. It's one important component, but not the entire picture. Every cybersecurity activity supports information security, but not every information security activity is a cybersecurity. Now, here's where today's topic becomes important. Notice something interesting here. Both information security and cybersecurity requires policies, the risk assessment, standards, accountability. And who helps provide all this? That's GRC. So it sits across both the disciplines. It ensures there is a structure, there is a direction, governance, and a strong accountability behind every security decision which is taken. Without GRC, the organizations may have a lot of security controls, but they will lack a clear strategy for managing all those technological controls. Next slide. This is why organization still get breached despite having security tools. So organizations, they spend millions of rupees or dollars on cybersecurity every year. They buy firewalls, they have the threat detection platforms, encryption technologies. Yet we continue to hear about major breaches almost every month or a week. So the obvious question is, why do organizations still get breached despite having the security tools? So here I have mentioned few points. The first one is, tools without policies are powerless. So a firewall is an amazing security tool, but if nobody defines what should be blocked or who is responsible for monitoring it, then it's just an expensive tool. Technology but needs guidance. Technology needs rules, and it needs some kind of governance. Second is no risk prioritization. So the second issue is lack of risk prioritization. One of the biggest mistakes, again, which organization makes is trying to protect everything equally. But that's impossible. Think about something in your own life. If your phone, your wallet, and your house keys, they were lying on a table, you would probably prioritize protecting some items more than the others. So organization also does the same thing. Some systems are critical, others are less important. So without the risk assessment, Companies often spend money protecting the low value asset, while their most critical asset can remain exposed. Compliance gaps and legal exposure. Another major challenge is compliance. So every organization, they have to follow some set of regulation, laws, or standards. So there are standards like 27001, or there are regulations like GDPR. So if an organization suffers a breach and fails to comply with the requirements of such regulations or standards, the breach itself may not be the only problem. There also will lead to regulatory penalties, loss of customer trust. So organizations aren't they're not just protecting systems, they are protecting their reputation and the legal standing of that organization as well. Then the last point is no accountability at the top. So when this basically talks about the leadership accountability. So when security is viewed as the IT department's problem, it often becomes everyone's last priority. So security decisions requires support from the leadership. There should be a budget which is allotted. There should be decisions made on the risk management. So that's why governance is so important. It makes security a business responsibility, not just a technical responsibility. So there is a real world example. In 2013, the retail giant Target, they experienced a massive breach affecting millions of customers. Now, what's interesting is that attackers didn't break through some futuristic vulnerability. They entered through a third-party vendor. So the technology existed, but the missing piece here was the effective vendor risk management. So in other words, the problem wasn't simply technical, it was a governance issue. All right, the next slide. So we'll now look into the key topic of today, governance, risk, and compliance, and we'll look into them individually. So at this point, we have established something important, that technology alone cannot secure an organization. And the answer to that is GRC. So these three components work together to provide direction, priorities, and the accountability. So I like explaining GRC, with an example of a road trip. So if you are driving to a destination, governance means it decides where you are going, who is responsible, and what the rules are. Risk management is about you identifying the roadblocks or how the traffic is, or are there any dangerous routes, or is there any potential problem. And compliance is that you're following the traffic laws, you're meeting the legal requirement. And cybersecurity is a vehicle that helps you get there safely. So without GRC, cybersecurity teams are essentially driving without a map. So the purpose of GRC, why does GRC exist? Because organization needs a way to align security with the business goals, meet legal and regulatory requirements, assign accountability, and measure the effectiveness. In short, GRC gives cybersecurity its direction, it gives cybersecurity a structure, and it also gives cybersecurity a purpose. Without GRC, organizations still have the tools, but they won't necessarily have a strategy for their security. All good so far? If you have any questions, please do mention it in the chat. Moving to the next slide. This is setting the direction for security. So now let's look at the first pillar of GRC, that is governance. So when people think about security, they usually think about technology. That's what we've been discussing so far. But before any technology is implemented, someone needs to answer a few important questions, like what are we exactly trying to protect, or who is responsible for protecting it, or what rules should everyone follow, and how do we know if the security is actually working. So that's exactly what governance does. It provides direction. You can think of it like a football team, I'll say. You can have talented players, you have great equipments, you have excellent fitness level, but without a coach, a game plan, and clear responsibilities, the team will still struggle. So organizations are no different from that. So here, the four areas. One is the security policies and standards. These are the rules of the game. They define things like password requirement or incident response procedures or data classification. Without policies, everyone create their own rules, and that's where the problem begins. Next is roles and accountability. So security, governance clearly defines responsibility so that security doesn't become somebody else's problem. Third is security strategy and objectives. Security should support the business goals, not block them. A good security program helps the business operate safely while still achieving its objectives. And finally, the performance and metrics. So organization needs to measure whether the security is working, because if we don't measure it, we cannot improve it. So if I had to summarize governance security. So without governance, security becomes reactive. With governance, security becomes more strategic. So that's about governance. Then this is the risk management. Yeah. So let's do a quick exercise. I'll say, imagine you're leaving your home for a week. You have your passport, you have your laptop, there is a coffee mug. So if you could only protect one of them first, which would you choose? It's a question to you. I've given three options. There is passport, there is a laptop, and there is a coffee mug. If you could only protect one of them first, which would you choose? You can just mention it in the chat. I hope you've got the question. Okay, somebody said laptop. Passport. Okay. Yeah. So here most people would choose the passport or the laptop. Why? Because they are more valuable and the impact of losing them is higher. And that's exactly how risk management works. I can see people still messaging. Yeah, so one of the another mistake organizations tend to make is trying to protect everything equally, like I mentioned earlier. So the reality is not that all assets carry the same level of risk. Risk management helps the organization now here to decide where to focus their efforts. So you'll notice 4 key steps here. One is identify, that means what assets do we have or what could go wrong. Then assessing it, how likely is it or what would the impact be. Treating means, do we reduce the risk or do we avoid it or do we accept it? And monitoring is, has anything changed? You need to continuously monitor if there are any new risks arising. And are the tools which we are using to reduce those risks still effective? And then the cycle continues. So imagine university students' record database is hit by a ransomware and suddenly becomes unavailable. Now the question is, what would be the impact? Who would be affected? Is it the students? Is it the faculty or the administration? Probably all of them. So that's why this would be considered a high priority risk. So risk management helps organization identify these critical scenarios before they happen and decide how to prepare for them. I hope everything is clear so far. Just give me a quick thumbs up. All right, thank you. And third one, that's the compliance. And the heading is, it's more than just ticking boxes. So when people hear the word compliance, they often think about paperwork, audits, and endless checklist. So in fact, many people see compliance as something organization do simply because they have to. But Compliance is much more important than that. So let me ask you a question. Why do we have traffic rules? Why do buildings have safety regulations? Uh, why do airplanes follow strict operating procedures? It's because society has agreed on a minimum standard of safety, and compliance work exactly the same way. It ensures that organization meets the minimum security and the privacy expectation. So on the slide, you can see here there is GDPR, which focuses on protecting personal data and privacy. That is a regulation. GDPR is a European regulation. Then there is HIPAA, which protects patient information in healthcare. There is a standard, ISO 27001, which is the most famous standard, which provides framework for managing information security. So now don't worry about memorizing these standards today. The important thing is understanding why they exist. So they provide organization with guidance, structure, and the accountability. But here's something important: compliance does not automatically mean security. An organization can meet minimum compliance requirement and still have risk. So that's why it's mentioned compliance is the floor, not the ceiling. So, in other words, compliance tells you the minimum that you must do. And the strong security often requires going beyond that minimum. And the next slide. So this is an analogy to understand all three. I've used the terms from a city to understand all these three. So let's simplify everything we have discussed so far with an analogy here. Now imagine that there is an organization. You can compare it to a city. For a city to function safely, it needs things. It needs city council. You can consider it as the governance. So the vision. So in cybersecurity, governance duties, and it provides the direction. Risk management, you can compare it to an MT, like which ones require attention first. So risk management works the same way. It helps organization identify the threat, assess the impact, and prioritize resources where they matter the most. And compliance is the building inspector. So the inspector checks whether the building meets the safety standards, not because the builder is bad, but because the standards are existing to protect everyone. And compliance serves a similar purpose in organization. It verifies that security and the regulatory requirements are being followed. So the important takeaway is that a successful city needs all the three. Without governance, there is no direction. Without risk management, the resources would be wasted. And without compliance, the standards aren't enforced. So the same applies to the organization. That's why GRC isn't just a support function. It's a foundation that helps organizations stay secure, resilient, and I've been using this term throughout, that is accountable. Accountability is the key term. All good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's move to the next slide. That is why GRC is critical for every organization. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, GRC sounds important for large corporations, banks, but does every organization really need it? So any organization that stores data, the or serves customers or process payments or operate digitally, they need some form of GRC. So just think about your own university or college. It stores student record, examination data, financial information, the employee details, or a hospital which is managing the patient records, or even a startup collecting customer information. So all of them need trust, accountability, and security. So the first GRC, it helps build the trust. So customer, students, patients, business partners, they want confidence that their information is being handled responsibly and it is done securely. And GRC improves resilience when incident happens, and eventually they do. Organization with strong governance and the strong risk management, they can recover much faster because they already have some plans in place. Organization makes decision based on actual risk and business priorities. And finally, GRC helps the organization remain compliant with the laws and regulation, which is very important, especially these days. So they reduce the risk of the fines or the lawsuits and the reputational damage that could be caused if there is no proper GRC in an organization. So GRC isn't just about avoiding problems, it's about creating trust, improving the resilience, making smarter decisions, and helping the organization to operate confidently in the increasingly digital world. The next slide is how GRC and cybersecurity work together. So one of the biggest misconception is that GRC and cybersecurity are separate or it's a competing functions. They're not. In reality, they are kind of like partners. So think of GRC as the let's say architect, and cybersecurity is the construction team. You need both. The architect creates the blueprint, the builders bring it to life. So GRC defines the requirement. This includes policies, risk appetite, security objectives. So for example, GRC might determine that customer data must be encrypted. Why? To meet the regulatory requirement. Step two is cybersecurity teams implement the controls. So they configure the systems, they deploy encryption or implement multi-factor authentication. Work happens. Step three is GRC again measures and reports. So through audits, assessments, and reviews, GRC verifies whether controls are actually working and reports the result back to the leadership. So if GRC says that customer data must be protected, now the cybersecurity answers, here's how we'll protect it. And then GRC asks, can you prove, is it working? So there is a partnership here. So security is the strongest when GRC and cybersecurity work together. GRC provides the direction and cybersecurity provides the implementation and the protection factor. Together they'll work and they help the organization achieve both security, effectiveness, and regulatory confidence. When many people think about cybersecurity careers, they imagine someone staring at the multiple monitors or hunting hackers all day. So a GRC professional's day, they look very different. Honestly, that's one of the reason I enjoyed this side of security. So take a look at some of the activities on the slide. A GRC professional, they might start the day by reviewing audit findings, updating a risk register, or drafting a new security policy. Later in the day, they could be conducting awareness training, reviewing supplier security questionnaires, or mapping the controls against standards like 27001, or preparing reports for the leadership. So here something's interesting is that most of these activities aren't highly technical. Instead, they involve communication, analysis, problem solving, and decision making. So a GRC professional will act as a bridge between the business teams, leadership, the auditors, and the technical security teams. So if you ever thought, I like cybersecurity, but I'm not passionate about coding or ethical hacking, that's completely okay, because the security industry needs people who can understand risk, who can write policies, who can communicate effectively, and help organization make the decisions. So in many organizations, those skills are just as valuable as technical expertise. And I have listed the career pathways, if you can see here. So, yeah, one of the biggest myth that I keep hearing is that everyone needs to study ethical hacking to be into cybersecurity. So cybersecurity offers multiple career path, and GRC is one of the fastest growing areas. On the left side, you can see the technical security pathway. So this has the SOC analyst, the pen tester, security engineer, and eventually leadership roles such as CISO. So these careers typically require skills in networking, operating systems, cloud security, and sometimes coding. On the right is the GRC pathway. So these roles include GRC analyst, risk manager, compliance officers, information security manager, or the data protection officer. So when it comes to regulations like GDPR and all, they need a data protection officer who needs to work away in the organization. So these roles focus more on policy, governance. It has auditing, compliance, and communication. So I'd like to understand from you all. So if you are more interested in the technical security aspect, just type T. If you're more interested now in governance, risk, and compliance, you can go ahead and type G. But if you think both are interesting and you need to figure it out, you can just write B. I'm going to take a minute here. I want to understand. So from the webinar today, after listening to this webinar, I'm just taking a quick poll here. So you can type in the chat. If you're more inclined to the technical security, type T. If you're more interested in governance and risk or compliance, you can type G. But if you're still confused, you can just type, you can go for both, B. I'll just wait for your answers. Both. Somebody's messaged B. Okay. T. Okay. So, um, so the good news is that neither path is better than the other. In fact, the most effective security leaders, they understand both worlds. Many CISOs today, they started in the technical security and many others started in GRC. But they eventually learned how technology or business and risk and compliance are all connected. And that's exactly the mindset the industry is also looking for. And the next slide is how to start your journey. So one question I get started exactly where you're today. Nobody begins as a security expert. The key is to focus on building strong fundamentals first. So first is build a foundation, understand the basics, learn concept like CIA triad, basic networking concept, common cyber threats, the risk management principles, or security framework such as 27001 and So don't worry about mastering every learning every tool. Step two is get certified. Next, consider the entry level certification. So there are various certifications which are like a starting point for everyone. So foundation for of all the standards, they or the introduction to them is excellent because it teaches how organization manages security through the policies. Remember that certifications don't guarantee a job, but they do demonstrate the knowledge that you have. Then gain practical experiences. So experience doesn't always mean employment. You can join clubs or participate in competitions. There are other platforms where you can practically learn or volunteer for activities in your university or even helping with IT support. And network, be active on LinkedIn, read the news, security news. So if you remember only one thing from the slide, let it be this: that you don't need years of experience to start your journey. You simply need the willingness to keep learning. And the next slide is the future of security. So the cyber threats, they are increasing nations, and that is exactly why GRC professionals are becoming so valuable. Every country will they have their own laws and regulations. There would be standards which you have to follow. Now, take artificial intelligence as an example. Organizations are rapidly adopting AI tools, but there is a question: who is responsible if AI makes a mistake? How do we protect sensitive data? So this is where AI governance comes in, creating entirely new area for the GRC professionals. Another growing area is the third party and supply chain risk management. Major incidents have occurred through vendors and suppliers. Expanding regulations. We are also seeing new regulations emerging around the world. There is GDPR, there is NIS2, and various privacy laws. And they're creating huge demand for the professionals who understands compliance and risk. So we are almost towards the end. So the core message, I'm just bringing it all together in the slide. So as we've come to the end of today's session, I'd like to leave a final note. When most people hear the word cybersecurity, they think about technology, and those are important. But as I've been explaining throughout, an idea about the GRC aspect also. Now, there is a three pillars. Take a look at the three pillars on the slide. The first pillar is people. Even the best technology can fail if people are unaware or they are careless or untrained. Second pillar is process. This is where the governance, risk management, compliance, and policies and procedures live. And finally, we have technology. It provides the tools needed to implement the GRC and make the organization stable. You can have excellent technology, but poor governance. You can have strong policies, but no technical control. You can have great tools and policies, but employees who are unaware of risk. In every case, the security will suffer. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from today's webinar, it's more about cybersecurity. It's not just technology, but it's also about the people, the process, all of them working together. And GRC will provide a structure that connects all three of them. Okay, so that was it from my end. We have another 10 minutes for Q&A. You can go ahead and pop up your questions in the chat. I'll just quickly have a look into them.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful and informative session. The way you explained of governance, risk, and compliance and their role in strengthening cybersecurity was truly valuable for all of us. We sincerely appreciate you for taking the time. Learning experience for everyone. And I would also like to inform all the participants that certificates will be provided only to those who have completed the registration form. If you have not yet registered, please do so using the link shared in the chat box. And now we can move to the Q&A session. Participants are welcome to ask their questions to today's topic. You can unmute your microphone and ask your questions. And also,
I can see a few questions in the chat. So anybody who has other questions, please do go ahead and mention in the chat. I'll be addressing them. So let me just go to the question. One question is, can you share a real world GRC incident that significantly impacted an organization? There are many. If one that comes, I don't know if you're aware, there was a company called Equifax. I think it was in 2017 or 18. Attackers exploited a known vulnerability in web application framework that already had been patched by the vendor. However, the organization failed to identify and patch all the affected systems in time, and as a result, the personal information of approximately 150 millions, I don't remember the exact number, was exposed. So from a GRC perspective, this wasn't just a technical failure, it highlighted issues across all the three, like the governance. There was lack of effective oversight, or the risk associated was not adequately identified, and the breach led to regulatory actions and legal actions. So technology failed at one point, but GRC here failed at multiple points. Then, okay, there is another question. How do you explain complex technical risk concepts to non-technical business stakeholders? Okay, that's a good question. So my perspective is that when communicating with non-technical stakeholders, the goal is not to explain the technology, it's to explain the business impact to them, because that's what they are more worried about. So instead of saying that there is a there is a unpatched systems, you can say that unauthorized individuals could potentially access sensitive customer information, which may result in the impacts like financial loss or regulatory penalties. So simple approaches avoid technical jargon, translate the technical risk analogies like I have used here. Analogies are the perfect way to explain anything, and focus on the impact they care about. That was the second. Can we look for the cybersecurity related newses? There are reliable sources, like we could just even you will get cybersecurity related news is now even on LinkedIn if you just randomly browse through. But there are Izaka, then you can follow like the standards to understand maybe the NIST and all, or hackers news. That's easy to read cybersecurity news and threat updates, which is continuously available. If there's more questions, please do mention in the chat. Okay, there is one more question, I think. How can GRC enable business growth rather than just acting as a box ticking exercise? Okay, so I think I had a session, a slide for this as well. So it's often misunderstood as just policies or documentation and audits. However, when implemented, it can be a significant business enabler. So a good GRC helps organization build trust with customers. It reduces the business risk that could disrupt operation, support market expansion, and accelerate sales and partnership, as many customers require the evidence of security and compliance before doing any business. So if a company achieves a compliance with standards like, let's say, 27001, it may be able to bid for new contract, enter regulated markets, or win customer trust more easily. So rather than asking how do we become compliant, organization should have an approach towards how can GRC help us achieve our objectives securely. Welcome. So I hope today's session was useful to everyone here. Can I just get a quick answer on that? Did you all find it interesting? Are you all more inclined towards knowing more about GRC? Are you interested in studying the subject? Good to hear that from all of you. Please keep attending more webinars from Avanzo. They will provide you with good more insights. Don't miss out on any of them. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. So I would say, yeah, thank you for your time and participation today. I really hope this session has helped you see cybersecurity from a broader perspective. Thank you once again for being such a wonderful audience. I had too many people reacting and responding and with the emojis or reactions. Thank you so much for that. And I wish you all the very best in your learning and career journeys. Have a fantastic day ahead and stay curious and stay secure.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Anything from your end, Shafiq? Is that all?
No,
I don't
no,
see
that's it.
any
Yeah.
question.
Thank you so much once again. Okay. And hope everyone just registered through that link in the chat box. And thank you all once again, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.